Hi, I'm James Kahn, and this is the book I've just released, Matamoros. It's a Civil War novel set in 1863 on the Rio Grande. Matamoros was the Mexican town right across the river from Brownsville, Texas, and it was considered the back door of the Confederacy. When Union naval ships had blockaded all the southern ports, the only place that the Confederacy could ship cotton out of was Matamoros, because that was a foreign port. So they shipped all their cotton into Texas and then south down through Texas to Brownsville, which is right on the Rio Grande. And then they ferried it across the river to Matamoros, and then ferried that down the river to the Gulf of Mexico and shipped it out to England and Belgium and all the places that wanted their cotton. And those ships in turn unloaded guns and shoes and all the things the Confederacy needed to keep fighting the war. They shipped that all from those ships into Matamoros, then across the river to Brownsville, and then distributed it through the South. So Matamoros was a city of Yankee and rebel spies, Texas Rangers, bandits, guerrillas, but also the same year Napoleon III had invaded Mexico to conquer it. So Matamoros was also full of French Foreign Legionnaires and Austrian soldiers, because Napoleon was installing his buddy Archduke Maximilian of Austria as his puppet dictator to be the Emperor of Mexico. So Matamoros was a wild city, and the hero of this book, Clayton Wilkes, is an expatriate Southern gentleman who opened a gambling casino in Matamoros. He has a murky past, and exciting things happen. So I'm going to do a little reading from the book now to give you some of the flavor of it. I've been told it reads a little bit more like an old Western novel than a Civil War novel. So here's to you. And without further ado, Matamoros, Chapter 1. We were north of Denver, Clayton remembered, winter of '58, packing up the mountainside in a blizzard with a headwind, 3 of us spread out. I tripped, and damned if it wasn't over the body of that very same lawman, frozen in ice, must have been 2 months dead. That's when he'd set out looking for us. What did you do then? Said Jim, the bartender. Well, I thought I'm going to have myself some fun with these boys. I brushed over my boot prints, backtracked a little, and walked around 20 yards higher, shot my pistol, and the others come a-running. They say, what's the matter? I say, I'm damned if I don't smell a dead body somewhere. Of course, they snorted at that. Can't nobody smell a corpse in a blizzard, Pete told me. I said, I don't know about that, but I smell one, and it's coming from down there somewheres. They give me even more shit then. The wind is blowing down that way, Oily yells at me. Can't smell nothing if you're upwind from it. I said I couldn't fault his logic, but I knew what I smelled. The barkeep could hardly contain his glee at what was coming next. Go on, what'd they say then? Well, they were all for moving on. But I said it wasn't proper to leave a man dead where critters could pick his bones, and I was going to go look for the body. They didn't like it, but they said okay, they'd help search for 10 minutes to humor me, but we had to make the miners' cabin by sunfall. I said Oily should look in the trees, and Pete better check out that bear patch below us. I knew Pete had the best eyes, so if I put him in the right neighborhood, he'd see the fellow. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, a shot goes off, and Pete's pointing at that body froze in ice. Jim was laughing like he'd never stop now. Go on, go on. How'd you smell that? Pete says to me. I told you I was the best tracker in the county, I told him. Nose like a bloodhound. So now will you pay me to... At that moment, Isaac walked up, looking serious. Teamster at table 4 appears to be cheating, he said, the fellow we discussed. Isaac was a muscular black man in red vest and cravat, dressed like a house slave, though there were, of course, no slaves here on the Mexican side of the river. There weren't even that many slaves across the border in Texas, partly because escaping to Mexico was so easy, partly because it was generally cheaper to hire Mexican labor and let them wade home at the end of the day than it was to keep and feed black American chattel. Isaac spoke with an educated New England accent. What he was doing south of the border was a matter of debate, and sometimes actual wagering, though neither Isaac nor Clayton offered any explanation. Their relationship alternated between fraternal and hierarchical, though it must have been a hierarchy of their own invention. In fact, they acted a little like brothers, though obviously they were not. Clayton at 38 had straw-colored hair, clean-shaven face, a Louisiana lilt, and a bent nose from a long-ago drubbing. His first offer was generally a smile, his second less genial. As owner of the Brave River Gambling Emporium, he dressed in the finest suits of London's silk or linen, and though the summer temperature was still above 90 past midnight, Clayton gave the impression of never sweating. Some attributed this to pricey medicaments he purchased from a Kiowa medicine man he did business with from time to time, some to the good fortune of a cool-blooded ancestry. Clayton answered few questions of a personal nature, though. That would have been a tell, and Clayton was nothing if not a good gambler. Good gamblers hid their cards in plain sight, the way chameleons hid their skins. But the chameleon's gift was also its failure, for it could be said to have no true color of its own. "I'll finish the story later," Clayton told Jim, then followed Isaac slowly through the crowd, where he picked up the smell of gambler's sweat mingled with a dozen other aromas. Tobacco smoke, chorizos grilled in the kitchen by Milagro, his ancient Mexican cook, the sweet perfumed women at the bar, warm beer, burning kerosene, and oiled boot leather. Clayton took it all in, the scents and sights, the clatter and clamor, his domain. Two main bartenders, Jim and Rumi, were both on duty tonight. Jim was a big, cheerful bear of a man who rarely spoke, but big enough to stop fights just by walking up. The other barkeep, Rumi, was a tough old dark-skinned fellow, some mestizo mix who kept a beehive out back where he went to get swarmed once a week. Swore the bee stings did wonders for his rheumatism. Clayton trusted them both to manage the room. Draping the walls were flags from 16 countries, mementos from the sailors who'd gambled away their shore leave. From above the bar, a stuffed giraffe's head, neck included, stayed forever vigilant, since being left on the doorstep by who knows who. Tattered crepe streamers still hung around the windows from some long-ago celebration, when mayors from 3 towns had come to a party that the Daily Ranchero reported kept both sides of the Rio Grande awake all night. Only one celebrant died of alcohol poisoning and one from accidental gunfire, which Clayton called a good night, and the sheriff called good riddance after seeing who the victims were. He passed a roped-off corner where a Reb and a Yankee boxed, bare-chested, bare-knuckled, bloody-faced, a dozen bettors cheering or booing. A 9-year-old pickpocket lifted the money pouch of one of the spectators, but Clayton grabbed the kid, made him slip the purse back to its rightful owner, and gave the boy a scowl meant to look dangerous. The youngster just stuck out his tongue. Reminded Clayton of himself at that age, stabbing him with a keen momentary flash of longing for that innocent time. He took a licorice stick from a jar on the bar, gave it to the kid, and pointed his thumb out the door. The little would-be thief grinned and ran off. Clayton and Isaac walked side by side until they reached the table in question, where they paused to watch 4 men play out a hand of stud poker. One wore the dented badge of a Texas Ranger, peevish but too drunk to focus. Beside him was a young fellow named Tinberry, dressed in diplomat blue, for the past months trying desperately to grow a mustache. He was the Union chargé d'affaires from Leonard Pierce's office, Pierce being the United States ambassador in Matamoros, appointed by Lincoln himself. Tinberry, on the other hand, was a career bureaucrat, posted here through random assignment. Bad luck, he'd say. Clayton nodded to this junior diplomat, whom he knew slightly and disliked slightly more. The third man at the table was a young, smooth-faced corporal in a Yankee blue uniform with some kind of Grand Army of the Republic campaign medal pinned to his chest. Looked too young to be a soldier, really, but every year the recruits got younger, as the early enlistees got killed off. Clayton had seen this boy quite a bit lately, here and around town, though they'd never spoken. Tinberry made introductions. "Wilkes, this is Beale, the new corporal of the guard at the embassy compound. Beale Wilkes." They nodded at each other, then Clayton's gaze moved on, while the corporal kept studying Clayton's face. The last poker player was clearly the teamster that Isaac had referred to, the man he'd said was cheating. Bewhiskered and weathered, his clothes were filthy, the way teamsters seemed to like them. He had the look of someone arrived in town that day, with a sizable stake by the looks of the mound in front of him. Clayton watched the man rake in another pot. Tinberry was watching as well, with more than a squint of suspicion. Clayton began telling a story. You boys know how a rattlesnake'll kill itself if it don't know when to slither away? How's that, Mr. Wilkes? Smiled Isaac, who had long experience being the shill in Clayton's tales. Man just needs to bring up his pistol and wave it real slow, back and forth in front of the rattler. Snake'll take a beat on the muzzle, follow its moves inch for inch, getting ready to strike. Thinks the gun muzzle is the eye of a hawk. That's when the man pulls the trigger. Blows the rattler's head off. Snake did all the aiming for him. Blind men could have done it. Of course, if the snake had any sense, it would have just eased on out. There was a confused silence. What the hell's that mean? Said the Texas Ranger. Means there's a snake at this table who needs to ease on out, said Clayton. He walked behind the teamster, put a hand on the man's shoulder. I'll have to ask you to divvy up your winnings to the other men and vacate the premises, sir. Clayton addressed him with courteous regret. Ask away, friend. I'm here to gamble. You have done so, sir, and lost. Out you go now. Who the hell are you? I'm Clayton Wilkes, and this is my establishment. You got special house rules I don't know about? The rules of the house are no cheating. Clayton grabbed him by the scruff of the shirt and pulled him upright. The man spun, drawing a Colt single action from his belt. But Clayton brought up a Derringer right quick, put the barrel to the teamster's chest, and pulled the trigger. The blast from the small firearm was barely loud enough to rise above the din of the room, but strong enough to knock the man backwards onto his ass on the table. A bullet to the heart will do that. He lay still on his back as a bloody stain spread across his shirt front, and his poker mates got up, stunned. Oh, my lord, said Tinberry. The teamster drew first. I saw it. This from the Texas Ranger, laconically indicating the recently deceased. That was amazing, said Corporal Beale in awe, evidently new to gunplay. Clayton reached under the dead man's sleeves and around his collar. Nothing there. But Isaac came forward to pop open the corpse's big belt buckle. An ace fell out. Isaac smiled. Some men like to keep their secret treasures close to their family jewels. Sorry about this, gentlemen, said Clayton. You all just split up his money. The ranger dug into the pile of cash between the cadaver's thighs and dispersed roughly equal portions to himself, the dumbfounded Yankee corporal, and Tinberry, who was methodically going through the dead man's pockets. Wish you hadn't done that, Wilkes, said Tinberry. We had good reason to believe he was an agent for the Confederacy. I was all set to have Beale arrest him. Found out he was a spy, you'd have hung him anyway. Yes, but if I'd been able to learn who his contact was, it might have shortened the war by a year. War is good for business. I got no use to shorten it. And folks here I let cheats play at my place, it's bad for business. That's my only politics. He shrugged and turned to Isaac. The water is wide, Isaac. You best send this boy home to Jesus. Isaac flung the body over his shoulder like an old coat and exited the back door to the river. The Texas Ranger moved to a new poker table. Consular Aide Tinberry drilled Clayton with a stare. That was a hell of a thing. How'd you know he was a cheat? Isaac told me. What if your boy'd been wrong? He's not my boy, and the day he's wrong, I'll wire you the news. Tinberry just cursed his ill fortune and walked away. Damn, said a voice cracked by excitement and youthful hormones. Clayton turned to see the young Yankee corporal looking at him with incredulous eyes. He'd forgotten the kid was still here. That was so audacious, said the young soldier. I mean, what guts it took, not to mention quick thinking. You are one cool customer. Well, you run a place like this, you learn to anticipate behavior, Clayton demurred. Anticipate is one thing. Ricochet the hell out of it's another. Well, we all have our own particular skills. I've no doubt you're a Jim Dandy sentry. With that, Clayton nodded politely and headed back upstairs to his office. The corporal watched him all the way.